Hello, this is Dennis, and welcome to the Grounded Reason podcast. Today, Joel and I are going to be talking about net neutrality and other internet policy issues because of the upcoming election. We're just covering the two major party candidates today because it would probably take us forever to go into all, four, and then if you count McMullen out there in Utah, then five candidates going. So we're just going to be doing Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton when it comes to issues and topics surrounding internet policy in the United States. This one went a bit long. Actually, it's our longest podcast ever, as Joel and I sat and talked about this for about an hour and a half. Before I start, I want to, let you know that we tried to be as fair with this as possible. And if you want to comment on any of the topics that we brought up, please send us an email at podcast@groundedreason.com, or you can call us at 650-TALK-GRP, and we can, maybe address some of the concerns or questions that you have on a future episode of the Grounded Reason podcast. As always, please remember to subscribe in iTunes to help us in the rankings, and here we go. With the election coming up, and how important, not only because I'm a cord cutter, but, because I'm a human in the information age, how important the internet is. And I mean, I don't even know if majority of people kind of look at it in that context. If you're in tech, of course, you might see it that way. But, the everyday person probably just sees it as a pretty awesome convenience.
Yeah, it is really easy to forget how integrated the internet is into our day-to-day lives now.
Right. It's everything. I mean, the economy would grind to a halt if it went down.
Would be very, very hard to do business in certainly most large companies.
Yeah.
Even mid-size would shudder at the idea of the internet having any real issues. And I think I know where you're going with this, so go for it.
Oh, you mean like how, since this is like it's kind of like, in my mind, it's probably one of my top three issues.
Yeah.
I mean, and I feel as though it really doesn't get the attention it deserves when it comes to presidential elections or elections in general.
And 'tis the season, right?
Exactly. So today, I wanted to talk about internet policy, mainly around net neutrality, because that was kind of like, the big issue last year, and there's still some battles going on in regards to the FCC's decisions on open internet.
It's also a watermark issue.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Like if you know where someone stands on net neutrality, you can largely guess the rest of their internet policy.
Yeah. I mean, and when it comes down, so I wanted to go in and first, before we get into, each candidate's position on net neutrality, and I also wanted to talk about SOPA, which is basically a piracy law last year, and then maybe also get into the recent kerfuffle where I recently heard that the United States is giving away ownership of the internet.
It's a little disturbing.
Well, just the fact that the United States owned the internet in the first place was a bit of a surprise to me.
Well,
I'm being sarcastic because no one really owns the internet. It's just kind of out there. But that's what's kind of going around right now is we'll get to it in a bit, but that's pretty much the argument, is that the United States has kind of given away the internet or something like that.
And it's ICANN, right?
Yeah, ICANN. Yeah. But we'll talk about that a bit later. But first, net neutrality. Just to kind of give a little bit of background, it's so basically, if you're for net neutrality, what you really want is no company or government agency or anyone for that matter, should be able to throttle or block sites based on the data that you are sending over the line. So it's kind of like when you're on the telephone, no one has the right to interfere with the content of the messages being passed over the telephone.
Right. It's speed and or the actual information contained in.
Right. And that's actually a good analogy is the telephone, because that's how it was.
Sure.
Before, I think, 2005, when the FCC...
Yeah, it all fell under telecommunication regulation.
Right. The FCC, at that time, there was a bit of a fox in the hen house, and there was a few telecom members on the board of the FCC, and they decided that instead of it being treated as a phone carrier service, it was to be treated as an information service. The pipes were to be treated as information itself.
Right. Same pipes.
Right. Which is a bit weird, because it's really just infrastructure. The pipes, if you don't have anyone on the line, that's not an information service. It's the capacity to transmit data.
Right.
So, and it was like that. I mean, if you're using a BBS, like back in the day in the 80s, you'd call on your modem through the phone line. So the internet prior to broadband was phone lines.
Yep.
So it really doesn't...
I mean, and that's up until at least 2004 when we were still talking DSL.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I mean, a lot of it. I mean, some of it cable was happening, but it was a bit of a mix and a mesh. But they said it was an information service back then in 2005. So it's been that way. And the FCC has basically, last year they came out and they said, we're going to put down some policies to essentially put it where it belongs, back under it's called Title II, and it's going to be considered a common carrier, but it's not going to be like a full utility Title II. There are some exemptions there. So it's basically to give the FCC permission to make rules to keep hands off of regulating speed and bandwidth and throttling.
Yeah. And so Dennis is going to get, go through like the gritty detail here for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to try and summarize like layperson style, like we do.
Right. So, I mean, really the argument, so when this happened last year and everyone went crazy, running around like their hair's on fire because, FCC was actually going to exert some power or regulatory. It is regulatory because it is a government agency doing it, but they are basically saying, I'm regulating it so businesses can't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So it's a bit nuanced. It's not just, they're regulating the internet, because that's the kind of the argument that you hear from the against side. Because basically their whole argument is that if Netflix and other video services are using enormous amounts of data, and they're using it all. They're using all the pipes.
Right.
I guess something along that's what they're
all
trying
the
to
tubes,
say. All the tubes
yeah.
are being used by Netflix. And Google and Skype has services out there where you can actually make free phone calls. Oh my God.
Right.
So they need to pay more to do that.
To compensate.
Exactly. And they're saying if those companies paid more, the ISPs could take that money and build better infrastructure.
Yeah, so in summary, right? Like the two major positions are basically those that are for net neutrality. Basically, you're saying, hey, treat it much like we do the historical policies towards the telephone lines, where all telephone traffic is treated equally. Mm-hmm. And the FCC was coming in basically changing the rule that was made in 2005, which treated internet traffic differently than telephone traffic.
Correct.
And they were in 2014 or 15?
It was last year those rules went into effect.
2015, they were changing them back to where internet traffic would be treated like telephone traffic.
Right, but in order to do that, they had to consider internet traffic. They had to basically give it a quasi-utility designation, which is, the technical. It's Title II is the technical.
Well, and the argument that, and Dennis is going to get into this in a second, I think, the argument that's peculiar about this is there is a certain amount of sense that goes along with the anti-net neutrality argument.
On its face, it sounds reasonable.
Right? Like, because it's, hey, there's infrastructure, X number of people are using the road, let's say, if they're using it more like a toll road, right, like we'll charge them more and so on. But basically what we've deemed as a society is that the flow of information is important for a variety of reasons, and you'll see this stated in a lot of different ways by political figures. But that the flow of information is so important and so much has been invested from our tax dollars into the creation of the internet,
right,
that it's effectively a public good, and it needs to be regulated in a way that allows traffic to be considered basically the same no matter what.
Right. Essentially, it's hands off the data is kind of like net neutrality's view. And the reason for that is, while it might sound reasonable, on its face, if you're not a technical person,
you have to think about what the end result would be.
Exactly. So imagine, okay, we put a rule in place that says, all right, if you pay this much money, you get this much pipe.
Yep.
Netflix or whoever, and that becomes the law of the land. Well, big companies have deep pockets,
right?
So they will start an arms race where they're buying up
all of the infrastructure,
massive amounts of the bandwidth. And I wouldn't be able to have my blog. I wouldn't be able to have this podcast with you because all of the
smaller voices that we love the internet for,
right,
would basically go away.
Right. That's the beauty of the internet is it is really the end result of the First Amendment. It's like a living, breathing First Amendment. Anybody who has a voice can be heard. Can
for good or ill.
Yes, but that's
whatever you want.
That's what this country cherishes is the fact that we can say whatever we want, as long as we're not yelling fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah, that's frowned upon.
That is actually by the court.
Well, and the I think it's important to make this distinction when we talk about the pipe, air quotes. You guys can't see.
We jokingly, when we say, the pipe or the tubes.
It's, again, a tribute to my boy, Ted Stevens.
Who comes up quite frequently.
R.I.P. But I will say, when we talk about the pipe, we're not talking about the pipe from the main line to your house, right? No. Or bouncing around inside of your building or whatever, right? We're talking about the pipes that actually, for lack of a better term, the pipes, right, that push broad internet traffic around the globe.
Right, because that's what a lot of politicians really, I can tell they don't realize it, because they'll say, oh, we're going to regulate, I don't know, online gambling. Good luck, my friends, because their servers aren't in the United States.
Yeah, they're wherever they are.
Yeah, unless you want to become China and start walling off, access to the internet.
Right.
That's what scares me, and that's kind of what net neutrality is designed to prevent.
Yep.
Because once you start saying, all right, companies can do what they want, whatever they want when it comes to, the data, they can say, oh, well, I don't like this paper, or I don't like this online publication. So I'm not going to give them, I'm not going to give them bandwidth. I'm going to throttle it.
Well, and so we've already summed up what the, policy of those that are against net neutrality is. And I think you can infer what the policy is of those that are pro net neutrality, but just to state it, basically it's to allow free movement of information, equally across the internet as a check against censorship, and monopolist power. Right.
Basically, yeah. In a nutshell, that's what it is. Personally, and actually, no, not even personally, but like if you talk to many people who are internet policy experts, Netflix uses more data, therefore they have to pay more, just doesn't hold water because it opens up a whole Pandora's box of problems. Yep. The argument that I hear most people state in opposition to net neutrality is the slippery slope argument.
Yeah. We've
given the FCC the ability to regulate the internet. What's going to happen now?
Yeah, and slippery is seriously.
It's not really a real argument.
No, I don't want to get too deep into philosophy, but like slippery slope arguments are generally like the good demarcation of this is not a legitimate argument, right? Like
it kind of is, but a lot of people that's kind of been lost, I think, in modern society, is people think that that's okay.
Yeah, and it's just not, because we constantly go, yes, this is okay, but this thing is not, and this thing is okay, and this thing is not.
Right,
along the spectrum.
Another decision point happens when you get to that next
slope.
So
like, hey, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example, but basically, like, any set of topics that you want to present, there is going to be a point where you say, yes, this is fine. However, this is the boundary, right? And that's just commonly applied across all topics.
Yeah. For a second, let's just pretend that we accept this slippery slope argument. And, all right, the government has the power to do what they will with the internet with this Title II designation. Is that any different than a company having that power?
No, and I guess the distinction there, right? Like, so true net neutrality is a check against both.
Correct.
Like we were saying, censorship and monopolist power. So, like, if we were to accept slippery slope, I could see the argument that, hey, we're potentially gonna run afoul of censorship concerns.
Yeah, well, you have a slippery slope either way is basically what I'm saying. It's like your slippery slope argument is nullified by the other slippery slope argument of, well, if the ISPs have complete domain over what's going on, that's really no different than the government having it. Actually, it's probably worse because
it's considerably worse.
Because the profit motive is the only thing they have going, so they're going to do whatever it takes to make money.
Well, I think it's finish your thoughts.
Where the government is more, it's we the people. So
yeah, the government's more accountable in the sense that it is very easy when the laws are passed to vote the people out who pass. I mean,
I've worked, within government before. It's hard. I don't understand the logic, because all I hear when it comes to things like that is the government can't do anything. They're totally impotent when it comes to getting anything done. Yet they're able to pull off these Machiavellian plans if we give them any bit of chance to do so.
Yeah. So I've worked at several, government agencies throughout my past, and like the thing that, like, I'll have buddies of mine that will say, oh, well, such and such conspiracy or such and such thing's a concern. And I've said, you're just assuming too much competence, right? Like, you have to remember, these are still people.
Yeah, but that's anywhere. Companies, anything.
It's just, these are people. They are not all Lex Luthor.
No.
Right? They're not, and that also assumes that there's no good actors involved. So the way I look at it is, net neutrality is the least dirty shirt, because it allows the government and the companies to be locked in a sort of stasis, and the rest of us get to use the internet, freely.
And that's really the bottom line. And if someone's gonna make a rule and enforce it that no one can screw with data that goes over the internet, I'm happy.
I see it no different than the government enforcing the fact that we're allowed to have free speech in general.
It's true. I mean,
Right.
yes, it's really if you kind of clear away all the fog that's put over this argument, really that's all we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about the government makes rules. This seems like a good one.
Yeah, and we have at least 10 that we've agreed on since the very, very beginning of this country.
Goes in with the first one we made.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
Kind of the the whole freedom of speech thing is kind of important.
Kind of a big deal.
Here are the rules that the FCC enacted last year. Okay, it's only 3. Rule number 1: no blocking. Broadband providers may not block access to legal content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Seems reasonable. Number 2: no throttling. Broadband providers may not impair or degrade lawful internet traffic on the basis of content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices.
So can I pause you on the first one?
Sure.
Going back to the first one, what I like about that rule is that is even implied, right? Like when if the government, let's say, because that is passed by the government, right? But if the government were to order an ISP to go ahead, and I'm not an attorney, but the way I'm interpreting that is if the government were to order an ISP to block such and such site,
They couldn't.
They cannot. And so to me, that rule is fantastic because, again, it's a check against both, other interests,
Right.
The government and the monopolists.
Yeah. And I think it's really their worry. I've never talked to an anti-net neutrality person that didn't work for, a telecom company that had a problem with these two rules and the one I'm about to mention. It's more of the whole, the FCC has their hands on the internet.
Right.
So
it's the government is scary, except for when they keep, cockroach legs out of my peanut butter.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Which
that's the thing.
I'm a fan of.
I like not having E. coli in my spinach.
And if you ever really want to get a sense, I almost said a taste, yeesh, of what that was like prior to our good friends at the FDA, who do their best. Read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, and you'll throw up in your lunch pail.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the third one, no paid prioritization. Broadband providers may not favor some lawful internet traffic over other lawful internet traffic in exchange for consideration of any kind. In other words, no fast lanes. This rule also bans ISPs from prioritizing content and services of their affiliates.
So basically what that means is no matter how much more interesting you all find Dennis than me, the ISPs cannot speed him up over me.
Or they can't cut out his vocal track.
Right, but Dennis can because he does all the editing.
That's true, I could. But I wouldn't, because I like having Joel on the show.
There we go.
So really that's net neutrality. And today we're going to...
Oh, yeah. So today, we're going to try not to get too political.
I did that, I think, already.
That's okay.
So I'll back it up.
Yeah, you get a little worked up, but, that's why we love you.
Yeah.
But we're going to try and get into the two major candidates for president positions on these topics. Now, it does... bear mentioning that we're not going to get into Gary Johnson's policy
true.
on this. And, sorry, but by all polls, the election is going to come down to either Secretary Clinton or Mr. Trump being the next president.
Yeah, and we just had to make a judgment call because then you'd also have to...
Jill Stein.
Well, there's Jill Stein, but then there's also... what's this? The constitutional candidate out there is actually making some movements now, too.
There's another gentleman in Utah, or is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah, that's the one I'm referring to, yeah. So, I mean...
He's capturing 22% of the vote in Utah right now.
Yep.
But we digress.
Yeah. So, So let's get down to net neutrality and each candidate's position on this.
Can we start with Hillary Clinton's position?
Okay, sure.
Because it's got a little more meat to
Well,
it.
it does, because she actually...
and we'll get to Mr. Trump's position in a minute.
She actually co-sponsored a bill in 2007 to try to use the legislature, because, FCC is an executive body. And so she co-sponsored a bill that was going to try to legislate the ISPs to be considered Title II, like phone companies.
Basically, the sponsors of that bill were trying to get what the executive branch just did in 2015. They were trying to do that in 2007.
Right, and basically the gist of it was broadband service providers shall not interfere with the ability of any person to use broadband service to access or offer any lawful content via the internet, and only prioritize content or services based on the type of content or service and the level of service purchased by the user without charge for such prioritization.
We just lost half of the people listening
I know.
to this.
Basically, it's the same thing. No prioritization.
Yeah.
And
it's those 3 rules.
It is in a nutshell, but that's really what this bill was. So this is what they were trying to do back then to kind of right the ills.
It didn't get through the legislative process.
It did not make it. But in this cycle, in the election, this year's election, she's been quoted, and this isn't an exact quote because I don't have it, but essentially it's paraphrasing. She said that she pledged to defend the FCC's net neutrality rules in court and continue to enforce them.
Yeah.
So pretty much that's as straight as answer I think you'll ever get from a politician on any issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, stay the course, enforce what the executive branch has laid down.
Right. Yeah. She's like, basically, yes, I'm for what the FCC said. That's kind of her position stated, and her history reflects that as well.
Yeah, and so
not because she's flip flopped on a few things. And
more than one.
This is one thing she hasn't,
and this is one thing she hasn't. And you can go out. Her position is very well stated, and it'll become evident while we're saying that in a minute. So you can find it and review it on your own if you'd like. We'll include some links in the show notes, and. The gist is what Dennis just walked through. So, I guess the thing now, since we're going to shift gears and get to Mr. Trump's position, the thing that I found frustrating about this election cycle in general, I mean, there's a lot of things, but one of the things is that so many major policy issues have not been debated for a variety of reasons, but one of the major reasons is that Mr. Trump has not made an actual policy statement. Now,
no, not in any formal terms.
Yeah. So, and I hate saying that because I don't want, we at Grounded Reason will not officially endorse any particular candidate.
No, blah, blah, blah. Because I like just kind of putting out there.
Not that anyone would care what we said, but
I mean, you can tell there's a bit of passion on certain things when it comes to the internet.
This one's important to us. I mean, like the people that.
But I'm more of an issues person. Well, I will talk about the issue and then make a decision on the person who agrees with me.
Well,
more.
and
it's not always. Usually it goes back and forth in an election cycle for me where I'm like, okay, on this one, that person agrees with me, but then on this issue, that person agrees with me. And I try to weigh which candidate agrees with me more on the most important issues for me, and that's who I vote for.
And say what you want about Mitt Romney.
Because I hate parties. I'm not
a party
person.
But, well, I mean,
I do like to get down and boogie, but talking about political parties.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, I do.
So... say what you want about Mitt Romney, but he had very, stated policies, and you could go and review them on their merits. Mr. Trump's, and we've tried, and Dennis did a ton of research on this, but the only statement that can be tracked down. Dennis, since you found it, I'll let you break the news.
Okay, well, if I were to ask you, what is Donald Trump's favorite medium to convey information, what would you think the answer would be?
Well, I know the answer.
It's Twitter.
It's Twitter.
It's a tweet. And I looked. I really did look to see if I could find something on net neutrality.
I will tell you, the good people at isidewith.com, which their job is to aggregate all of the positions of all of the candidates running for president or Congress and cite them. The source they cite for net neutrality for Mr. Trump is a tweet from 2014.
That's what I found. The tweet says, Obama's attack on the internet is another top-down power grab. Net neutrality is the Fairness Doctrine. It's Twitter, so you only have 140 characters. Will target conservative media. He will target conservative media, is essentially what he's saying there.
Right. And so Dennis will unpack this some, but so there's two things there that are side-worthy.
Well, the first thing is the slippery slope argument we talked about earlier.
Well, so three things. Yeah. One is the slippery slope argument.
Yeah, because Obama's attack on the internet is another top-down
it's going to get worse and worse.
Right.
Right. The next one is, les sai. We are talking. That was my French.
It was good.
Yeah, thank you.
We are.
Yeah. So we are talking like a legitimate candidate for the presidency, only stated position on a pretty big deal in net neutrality.
Probably the biggest deal to hit the internet.
Yeah, I mean it's just,
in a long time.
I'd say it's the single biggest issue facing the executive branch regarding the internet.
Definitely. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's totally. So the only stated policy is a tweet, again, from 2 years ago. And then, the third issue is he's actually conflating two different topics in that one statement.
Yeah, that one kind of hurt. I kind of felt kind of bad. I don't know. That's not the right word. I don't know. I read it and I was just kind of like, that's kind of... Because basically, the Fairness Doctrine, it's the FCC, and I think that's kind of where that's happening.
It's a thing.
Well, right, yeah. Well, it's he took two policies the FCC kind of put forth and
conflated them,
treated them the same. So basically, the Fairness Doctrine, and it's a policy in the 40s that said broadcasters must present issues in an honest, equitable, and balanced way. And it was eliminated in 87. Here's the thing. I agree with the elimination of the Fairness Doctrine because it is forcing people to give equal time, which is similar to forcing the control over the data.
Yeah,
it's kind of this. It's the opposite.
And this is a really, really important thing in our time, is that. So there's this whole idea, and I'm sorry, this phrase is loaded because Fox News uses it as a news slogan, but for shorthand, I'll use it. But fair and balanced, right? So so not to pick on Fox News, but that is their slogan, and it's the phrase that sticks in my mind. So if someone says the Earth is flat, and that is the opposing argument to all, educated people on the planet.
Right.
It doesn't mean you should give them equal airtime just because they have an opposing view.
Well, there's that, and I have faith that the American public can sort that out.
Right, but the point of that doctrine being repealed is that if you present them equally...
That's true.
You will unintentionally, you will create a false equivalence.
Right.
And so that's why you repeal something like that, because it has the unintended consequence of less legitimate views being presented as equally legitimate.
And it boxes people in to give equal time on an issue. Let's be honest here. If we're talking about this issue, I got to stretch the 140 character tweet for the same amount of time I'm going to give the other candidates. And if they've laid out a whole, 20 minutes worth of policy, I've got to unpack this tweet for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and that's a lot of time per word.
Right. So,
in that tweet.
Right. So, I just thought the Fairness Doctrine, and that's whoever your political affiliation is, it's kind of a bunk. It was kind of a mistake in the first place.
And also, it doesn't really relate to net neutrality. And that's the key point.
No, not only does it not relate, it's kind of the opposite of.
Yeah.
Like when you take it in that context of, you're basically legislating the content. Yeah. Saying that this content has to happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And this is saying we can't legislate the content. That's what net neutrality is. It's saying we're not going to govern data or the information that's being passed.
Frankly, to me, is the best of all possible worlds. Obviously, we're small time, whatever you want to call us, but internet. Content providers, right? Like, so of course we like net neutrality, right. But also like just, if I want to hear alternate views on whatever, right? I have a search engine.
Yep.
And I can go get their content and it will download just as fast. Yes. And it's not blocked, and that's great.
Whatever need the people who put the Fairness Doctrine in place felt at the time when they made that law, the internet has fixed it. Yeah. Like there's no need for anything like that anymore, unless you don't have something like net neutrality in place, right. Because then you can actually like instate control over what people are saying.
So let's go another logical leap, right? Like, so I'll just put cards on the table. I tend to listen to NPR, and I, watch Bloomberg and things like that. So I'm a relatively liberal person, and I have I
would say classically liberal.
Classically liberal.
Not like liberal like it's used today.
I'm liberal in the sense that I would prefer the federal government staying out of most of our business as much as possible.
Because that's originally what the meaning of the word. It means to be
exactly what it meant.
Free.
And I am fiscally conservative. Yeah, I and again that is classically liberal in the sense that Ben Franklin was liberal. Right. So that being said, the good people at Breitbart, who I don't find the information they put forward useful, but some people do.
Some people do.
And God forbid anyone were to ever block their content, right? Because that should be out there, because those people should be able to get their voice heard in an open forum, and then people can try and debunk what they're saying or whatever, and back and forth. You
know what? Sometimes the opposing political view to me has a good idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like let's say it's Breitbart or whatever. A good idea can show up on Breitbart.
I pick on Breitbart just because of its affiliation with Trump.
Right.
And I should be respectful. It's Mr. Trump. And, but just to, that is a very obvious connection. But the one that I used to say all the time with, when I would talk to like my libertarian friends was that Ron Paul. And I used to jokingly call him Uncle Ronnie.
I love Ron Paul. I really do.
I love me some Ron Paul. And it's not that I would ever vote for him for president, because I would not.
I like that he brings
But I want him at the table.
Every debate. I want him at every debate because he'll bring up the issues that I want them talking about.
80% of what Ron Paul says is brilliant. And then there's 20% where I go, oh, that's just crazy. Uncle Ronnie.
I know.
And that's... But you know what? That 80% is really useful. And so, I want him there every year. Out there.
And Rand, too. Rand does the same thing.
Yeah, I think actually Rand is... Yeah. I think he's a little more politically savvy
he's
than
definitely,
his dad.
Definitely.
He's not quite as...
But he brings up those issues.
But he's still pretty principled.
He does. He's very principled. I mean, and, that's important. It's important to have that voice at the table, so you're forcing the other candidates to engage in those topics. Because... otherwise, it would be a lot of fluff, a lot of, social issues that.
Another thing is that I mean, I'm an arrogant person, just like everyone else, right? Like, but I'm not so arrogant to think that I've got everything figured out, right? Like, so I want those opinions out there, challenging anything I have as my set opinions, and I can go, I wonder if that's legit. And sometimes they are, and sometimes it changed my opinion. Right, like
that's how I go in. I try to. I mean, it's so hard.
It is hard.
It is hard because
I'm getting old.
It is. And you're. You become set in your beliefs.
You don't have to agree so easily with the "I'm getting old."
Oh, I am. I am.
Well, yeah, but I thought you were talking about me.
Oh, well, no, I was the collective us.
You are. I'm not.
We're the same age.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, you're a couple months older than me.
Yeah. So. I suck.
That only matters really when we're like in our 90s, though.
Or when you're in your single digits, when you're like, I'm 4 months.
Oh, that's true.
Or 4 years old and 6 months.
Yeah, two is much. It's like leaps and bounds over 1.5.
Oh yeah. So anyways, the frustration here is not with Mr. Trump for a variety of other topics, because that's for a later date, and not this podcast. But it's more specifically like a lack of stated policy on an important issue.
Yep, exactly. And that's what. And I really did search, and I always wish there was more, but there's not.
Yeah, and honestly, if we have any Trump supporters,
please, if you have some sources, throw it at us.
Well, one, if you know what his stated position is,
True.
and it's different than what ours is, what we have found. Love to hear about it.
Definitely, because we would correct it. I mean, we would,
absolutely. If we would go on the air and correct it.
Yep.
And two, if you don't know of it, I would love to hear someone from within his own support, push him to come out with a stated position, because then everyone could evaluate it.
Exactly.
Right,
and that's what this is for. That's what this time should be for. Not talking about the scandal or that scandal. It should really be.
I mean, that stuff makes me sad.
I know it does.
So I mean, like, I think those are the two big things we wanted to talk about. Anything else we want to talk about?
Well, you've got a couple things here with
ICANN and all that stuff. Yeah, can't leave those out.
Well, see, that's the thing, and ICANN really shouldn't even be an issue.
No. Well, so in principle, if I understood this correctly,
okay,
it's basically that some of the major nodes of the internet were within the borders of the United States, and the United States, because of ARPANET, and those who don't know, ARPANET was the predecessor to the internet, which was just ARPANET was a series of networked computers that was
universities
created by
and the Department of Defense.
Yeah, that was created by DARPA and some of their scientists and some of the universities that worked in conjunction.
Originally, to come up with a communications network to to basically operate if there was thermonuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was basically that some really, really smart people said, hey, what if Washington gets blown up by the Soviets, when there were Soviets?
So they're like, let's create a mesh network. Instead of having like a line point to point, like kind of telephone lines kind of work.
Yep.
Where you have to go to a hub. This is kind of like, let's invent a mesh network. And that's what TCP/IP is.
That's exactly right. And so, again, when we were kind of talking about, like, the internet and it being a public good and the government having laid a lot of this, groundwork and our tax dollars, this is what we were referring to as ARPANET.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of those protocols that we take for granted now.
So for that to work, though, you don't put in an IP address when you want to go to google.com.
Not anymore.
You put google.com in.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is ICANN. Yeah. ICANN is the standards on the names and addresses that we use on the internet. It stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers.
Yeah, and I believe it's a not-for-profit entity.
Right.
But I forget what legal structure it falls under.
It was stewarded by the U.S. Commerce Department.
Yeah.
So Commerce basically stewarded the...
Yeah. They said we need
ICANN.
international entity to lay these rules out
Right.
there.
So
And
since
thank God they did.
since it came in, and I think in like the late 90s, they basically, the whole agreement was, we will handle it, but the ultimate goal is to have a freestanding body that is free of government border and basically meets and devises these standards. And it's really supposed to consist of, technical experts and, of course, you're going to have governments there.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of different government
But
officials.
the point
but
is
you'll
to
also
do it
have-
by committee, have all the stakeholders there, and also a window into for like democratic intake, to where if there are issues from outside of ICANN, they can be put into ICANN and addressed by ICANN.
I think what they do is they basically follow the same rulemaking process that our executive branch does, where they put things out for comment for X number of months.
Multi-stakeholder
and then,
model, essentially,
and then it comes
is
back. Yep.
what they use.
And if anybody is interested, if you refer back to our back catalog to the Internet of Things issue, the protocols that are used to make that possible were all laid out by this committee.
Exactly. So what happened, because we've been planning it for a while, October 1st of this year,
Yeah.
basically, and really, it was ceremonial.
It's a non-event.
It really should have been, because the Commerce Department has no influence over ICANN.
No.
Really. I mean,
No, it's
kind
a
of
separate entity.
It's symbolic.
Yeah, it's a separate legal entity, and it's such a non-event in the sense that the internet is. Maybe we should get to the controversy around this to give people.
So on October 1st, we kind of, the U.S. Commerce Department cut it loose, and ICANN is functioning the same exact way it did.
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. It's just that it's not underneath the Commerce Department, and it's finally a freestanding corporate entity.
Yeah.
But like multinational.
And
like,
legally it had been
nonprofit.
for a long time.
Right. It has. It's not like they went and hired a bunch of new people. It's the same people doing it. They've always done it.
It's just formalized.
It's just formally its own entity, and it's no longer part of commerce. Well, I've seen some headlines.
Yeah, some people have gotten a little freaked out by this because they've decided to not take things in context.
No, I mean, they said the U.S. is giving up control of the internet. That literally, I think Gingrich said that literally.
Let's just be straight. The United States has not had control over the internet for in any sense that we have known the internet. The internet has not been controlled by the United States. Like, as long as we have really been using, since Netscape's days, the internet has not been controlled. But in fact, the World Wide Web, the phrase was not even coined by an American.
Right.
Right?
Well, the World Wide Web is CERN.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
I believe the guy was like Belgian.
Yeah. The internet as we know it is not, the World Wide Web is not an American invention.
Right.
No.
The internet, the idea of, a network of machines.
We invented the underlying infrastructure that the World Wide Web
but the
is laid
idea
upon.
of distributing HTML and all of the blah, 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 like that came later. And that's my point, is that the internet has grown up and has long since left mom and dad's basement.
Oh, right. It has. And it's and that's the thing. There's no, and that's, when I see the internet, I see no borders.
No.
It's just,
That's what it should be.
exactly. And that's because that's what it is. It's like unless you're in China. Sorry, China. If you can hear us.
Yeah, if you could hear us, we're sorry.
I mean,
but again, I actually heard someone, and I like, at least conceptually, this. Someone referred to the internet as the collective intelligence of all of humanity.
it really is.
It's really close.
I mean,
Right.
it's like we used to write on walls,
Yeah.
and then we invented parchment. this is the next step. This is like, us.
Well, I think you missed a couple steps, but yeah.
Well, parchment paper, typewriter, I mean.
Movable type.
Movable type. But I mean, okay. But that again.
But I got you.
You got me. Okay.
I understand what you're saying. But yeah, no, you're right. This is a logical step.
Well, that's what makes us special, is not, the opposable thumbs, which are nice, because other animals have those, and,
meerkats.
Yeah.
Meerkats are freaky, man.
Oh, they really are.
Trust me, a meerkat.
The brain and the cognitive ability is nice.
Yeah. But they're pretty smart animals out there.
There are. The fact that we pass information on...
And we do it outside of our genetic code.
Exactly.
Is the big deal.
That's the thing that makes it... Because we don't... you get some smart bees, they die.
That's that.
That colony has to learn that all over again.
And
they do it forever and ever and ever.
I can go read a lot of books. And now, granted, book learning is not quite the same thing as experience, but it's a decent proxy.
Oh.
Right? I can learn a lot from a book.
Or you can at least learn that you should have learned.
Right.
When you make the mistake, you're like, I should have trusted that book. And then next time,
that book was right.
Maybe, yeah, so you'll eventually get it.
But, or you go, that book was wrong. And you edit the book.
There you go.
Right? Or write a new book or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, like, the internet is just that on steroids. And I hate that expression because that's so overused.
It is.
But it is that. I don't care.
Okay, well, I just also wanted to say, it was Gingrich, over Twitter, of course.
Yeah.
What's up with Twitter? He said every American should worry about Obama giving up control of the internet to an undefined group, which is the group that it's always been, but okay. This is very, very, two varies. Dangerous.
Right.
Very, very dangerous. All right. So to get to the candidates' positions, I just wanted to, make sure that I had that right when I said Gingrich. So to get to the candidates' positions on this, Clinton supports the transition, as do most tech policy experts.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just continuation of existing policy.
Yeah,
it's always been the stated position that this was going to happen.
Okay. The technical standards of naming and addressing should be left to technical experts and internet stakeholders, not the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anyway. I mean, it really was, the U.S. government really wasn't making any rules when it comes to ICANN. It was ICANN.
Well, I'm going to get people from the Commerce Department angry at me. But the Commerce Department in general its purpose is to just try and stimulate economic activity. Mm-hmm. It really isn't for rulemaking.
Nope.
It is not a regulatory
body. Which is why they kind of punted to ICANN on this, because it made sense.
Well, they did the same thing.
But I mean, when I say punted, not now. Like back in 1998 is what they did. They formed ICANN and said, all right, you're under arrest.
I believe they do the same thing with the Import-Export Bank and several of other... And please edit that out if that's wrong. But I believe they do that with quite a few entities that they support.
Okay, so Hillary. I mean, it's a non-issue, honestly.
Yeah.
But let's see. All right, Trump.
Mr. Trump.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Trump.
Oh, I wasn't.
No, I'm serious. I should say Mr. Trump. I feel bad. So Mr. Trump, he opposes the U.S. Internet Transition Plan, which his campaign has also falsely said that it'll turn control of the internet over to the United Nations.
I don't even know what to do with that. Did I have a stroke during that statement? Did that happen? Did
he said that.
Say that? No, but did you say that?
Yeah.
Like that's a thing?
But he said that.
Because the United Nations... No, that's not what's happening.
The UN's not involved at all.
No.
Like, at all. Like, not
I
even...
was never involved to this point. And so this is worrisome. And again, not commenting on anything else that the campaign has said. Just the lack of depth on these topics is really frustrating because I think it's just straight laziness. It's not that they're not bright, right? Like the campaign has smart people in it. They could have informed decisions on this, or certainly hire people with informed, opinions.
I just don't really understand where he even... you know what? Cruz. I recall Cruz saying something like that, and I think that he's kind of just...
parodying him back.
I think.
Well, what it sounds like to me is like if I was standing in line at Starbucks and I saw someone at work and they, from my work, and they walked by and said, "Hey, what do you think of that big trade that the Redskins just did?" And I have absolutely no idea what they're talking, and I go, "I don't know. It's all a bunch of..."
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's probably just an off-the-cuff remark.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean...
Trying not to curse so we don't have to get the E on this topic.
But yeah, I mean, I totally understand. I totally get what you're saying, because I'm sure that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Trump seems like an extroverted guy, shoots from the hip a bit.
Which I that's whatever, right? Like, but
I mean, he just says what's on his mind. So I can totally see Cruz said United Nations. He heard United Nations. And he's like, it sounds like, it's that. Who wants the United Nations controlling
over to the United Nations? That sounds bad.
I don't want the United Nations controlling the internet.
That's our thing, right? But
I don't want anyone controlling
it. That's ours. Like, why would we give the UN rights over our highways? It's not our highways.
Right. But let's wait. No one's controlling the internet. I don't even know where this
legitimately no one.
It's not even happening.
No.
It's almost like I said, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. And you said, why do you want to kill all these people?
Right. Totally legitimate question.
Just like...
Boy.
I don't know.
It's just this cycle, man. It's just this cycle.
It is. And I was going to get, I could get into SOPA a bit, but really, long story short.
Basically same.
Yeah. Because, and I don't want to do it again. But Trump didn't say anything about SOPA.
Yeah, so it boils down to stated position, position.
SOPA really quick is, it's called the Stop Online Piracy Act. And it's kind of a very, very dangerous law that tried to pass a year or two back, because it basically says, I think politicians finally learned that they cannot regulate the internet because not all of it exists in the United States. So their issue is when it comes to intellectual property rules. Say I'm selling pirated software, or not even selling, but just distributing software that is intellectual property. If my server's over in, wherever, Cuba, India, wherever, there's no jurisdiction for the United States to do anything. Yeah. They kind of just have to live with it. So they tried to make something called the Stop Online Piracy Act, which gives them the right to control, basically to hold content providers in the United States. So if you have a server in the United States and someone put, say you have a forum or your Facebook or your YouTube, and somebody posts something or puts something out there that isn't completely kosher, then it's YouTube or whoever who owns that content distribution platform is held responsible. That is an extremely dangerous rule.
Yeah, and there's a variety of reasons for it.
Because it basically would set up a police state of content checking. Because if I owned a site, like if you came on groundedreason.com, I would probably edit out I probably wouldn't even allow comments.
Well, how about this? Our friends at Cody, who we had an entire episode.
Oh yeah, check that one out. I like that. Right?
Yeah, but it's we got some good feedback on that one. So, but our friends there are struggling with, like, people are putting apps on their platform, and they're trying to put this in check now, but they're putting apps that basically allow access to content distribution sites like Netflix or whatever, and seemingly for free.
Right.
And so that's a real challenge. And what this law would do is hold Cody as legally liable for that type of issue, or even worse, or at least as bad. Let's say it's Cody's platform. Someone has an app. It's an open source platform. Someone contributes code to that app. I don't notice that in that they've put a way for me to get access to another platform's content. Now, both whoever created that app and hosts that app and Cody are legally liable.
Exactly.
So it just becomes a big rat's nest.
And the owner of the platform isn't breaking any laws, but they're being held responsible for somebody else's wrongdoing.
Yep.
So, I mean, and that's, it just...
Well, it's going to stifle innovation, too.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, because you're not, like, do you think YouTube would allow free uploading? Like, you couldn't just walk up and upload anything and have it be there instantly if they were going to have this law in place? It would shut down innovation.
Half of the stuff on YouTube is content that eventually gets taken down.
Oh, and let's clarify. If something goes, that's what, to your point, that law exists already.
Yeah.
If somebody goes and puts something up, they file a DMCA, which is digital medium, blah, 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 blah. Basically, it's a takedown
Cease and desist.
Cease and desist, yes. Take it off of there.
And eventually comes down, like, House of Cosby, which was one of my favorite.
Oh, I remember that one.
Oh, God, I loved that.
That's E-Bombs World. That's like years
that's
ago.
Way back. That's like 2005.
Yeah.
And,
Actually, it's probably not E-Bombs World because that guy just pretty much stole everyone else's content put on his site.
But anyways, that's what we have cease and desist type laws for. And so it's already covered. And basically what you would end up with is some sort of, with this new provision, you'd end up with some sort of weird, like, internet police state thing.
Well,
and
the funny thing about it is this was kind of really flying under the radar. And then it would have passed.
Well, I'll tell you why.
But then the internet, like, it got out there, and like every company was like Google, Wikipedia, everyone was just like, anybody who has like any knowledge of how the internet works was just like, what are you guys doing? And completely flipped and said, and then it kind of got tabled. And I don't think this thing's going to see the light of day, but I think it's a very important litmus test for legislators to see what their positions were on this.
So say the name of the law again.
It's SOPA. It's the Stop Online Piracy Act.
And again, I've said this on another one of our episodes. I don't remember which one it was. But this is why I don't think we should be allowed to put names on bills that are put forward.
Because that sounds nice.
That sounds good. Who wants online piracy?
No one.
Pirates are scary. They have patches and parrots and sabers and
and Somali pirates are terrifying.
Yeah, they have AK-47s. And I saw that Tom Hanks movie.
I know. See, that's like when I wanted to, because we went to the Ren Fest this weekend. I was hoping it was Pirate Weekend. It wasn't. The Renaissance Festival.
So you came dressed as a pirate?
I would have wanted to come dressed as a Somali pirate and see if anyone got it.
Oh, I totally would have gotten that. But, I had to tell my kids at one point that there are still pirates, and they were like, no way.
Yeah, no.
No.
Well, that's like, when that happened, I was just like, what?
We have pirates? Do they have parrots?
No, not at all.
No, these guys do not. No, not
scary
parrots.
guys.
They are very, and that's what real pirates back in the day were.
They were
very,
scary.
very scary.
Yeah, it's funny how
very likely to kill you.
We did the same thing with gangsters.
Yeah,
it's always like, you see,
they were terrifying.
They're very scary.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I mean,
Hillary. So that's SOPA.
Hillary. Let me start that one over. Secretary Clinton has. Actually, she has a really good quote on this, and I hate saying that, but she does.
She has a good one every now and again.
I just don't want to feel. I don't want it to sound like I'm kind of,
Well, I will tell you, the trumped up trickle down thing did not really hold up. That's not a bumper sticker.
Oh,
remember that?
Yeah, that's true.
So she's not the most quotable person.
See,
in the
I would have
world.
went with Trumple Down.
Okay,
I don't know. I think that just has a better ring to it. Trumple down.
You're killing me.
Trumple down economics, but I don't know.
But anyways, she has the occasional good quote, and you
she
got
said,
one here.
Yeah, when ideas are blocked, information deleted, conversation stifled, and people constrained in their choices, the internet is diminished for all of us.
Yeah,
that's all she said when it comes to SOPA.
That's pretty
and that says
good.
it all. That really does say it all.
Boy, you sure you want to do that, guys?
Right.
That's what that basically is.
Yeah, I mean, she also said, there's another one actually. She said there isn't an economic internet and a social internet and a political internet. There's just the internet.
Yeah,
that's it. And that's kind of what we've been saying.
That's the point. Like, and again, this is going back to
she gets this issue. She understands it.
Going back to the First Amendment stuff we talked about earlier, like, I may not like, and maybe I am picking on him a little, but I may not like a lot of the things that Breitbart or whoever says. But they have the right, and they should have the right to say it.
Oh, definitely.
And that's what we're talking about here with all of this stuff, is that, like, just because they're ideas that I disagree with in principle, and I might, spend my entire life disagreeing with, doesn't mean they shouldn't get heard. And any of these things we've been talking about have the potential to go the opposite direction.
Right. Yeah, it's totally true. And I mean, so when it comes to Mr. Trump on this one, he didn't say any, like, SOPA really wasn't mentioned, but what was mentioned is the idea of, well, he mentioned it in reference to ISIS. He mentioned that we need to kind of close up parts of the internet.
Yeah, I heard that one.
So in the debate, he was asked about it. And the question was, you recently suggested closing up the internet, and that's in quotes, as a way to stop ISIS from recruiting online. And, some say that would put U.S. in line with China and North Korea, which kind of would.
I would agree.
And his response was, here, I'll read the whole thing. Okay, Mr. Trump said, ISIS is recruiting through the internet. ISIS is using the internet better than we are using the internet, and it was our idea. I want to get our brilliant people from Silicon Valley and other places to figure out a way that ISIS cannot do what they're doing. You talk freedom of speech. I don't want them using our internet to take our young, impressionable youth. We should be using our most brilliant minds to figure out a way that ISIS cannot use the internet. And then we should be able to penetrate the internet and find out exactly where ISIS is and everything about ISIS. And we can do that if we use our good people.
That's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words, man. All right, so
because
that was a bit, well, hold on, because it was a bit unclear. Well, not really. It was
completely opaque.
Yeah, there's good people. You got to get the good people to... wait, well, let's see. Okay. So he asked him again. So he said, are you open... Because he heard all this and he just... the moderator said, are you open to closing parts of the internet? Point blank.
Right.
And Mr. Trump said, I would certainly be open to closing areas where we're at war with somebody. I don't want to let people that want to kill us use our internet.
So I'm just trying to keep this in perspective and not get too agitated by that comment. But the first piece is, it is not our internet.
No, it's not.
It's like saying our atmosphere at this point, right? Like, yes, if there were a way to do it, I would remove the atmosphere from ISIS so they could not breathe. And then we would win, right?
And if you don't want our children talking to ISIS, shouldn't that be the parents' responsibility to make sure their children aren't talking to ISIS?
That's normally the small government argument, right? Like, yeah, but and I would agree, but my broader point, and I hope I'm not offending anyone, but is that campaign, Mr. Trump's campaign, has for whatever reason decided to not have policy positions on these things. So then when he gets asked these questions, he has no stated policy. Like, he can't refer back to something. That is clearly the response of someone who has not thought through the issue and put pen to paper.
Oh, no, because you can't just shut off sections of the internet. It's not like you
Doesn't
can
work like
It's not like you can go to the basement and just look at the breaker box and be like, oh, that ISIS part that people are talking to, I'm just going to turn that one off.
Well, and even if you're to try and do something like the Great Firewall of China, right? Which is what
people poke holes in that thing all the time.
One, they poke holes in that all the time, but two, that is a broad censorship tool.
It is like they have a huge router.
Go look Falun Gong.
Oh yeah, it is. It's
from an IP address in China.
Right,
you're not gonna find much.
No, because it is. It's basically like how your company basically blocks ports and. Yeah, it's really that on the whole entire country
of 1.3 billion people. It is staggering. I mean, like, it really is a technical marvel what they've done. But that being said, like, the only way to do what was in that stated position would be to engage in something like that.
Yeah, you'd have to control everything because you'd have to find a way to sort the ISIS pieces out from everything else or whatever enemy we're fighting.
Massive.
So you essentially have to listen in on everything.
Yeah.
Find out what's going on, and then basically shut it down. If you're talking about a massive police state on the internet.
It would be, and it's a terrifying prospect.
So, I can't say that Mr. Trump backs SOPA, but this would lead me to believe this is very similar.
I also have a really hard time reconciling the net neutrality position we heard kind of half stated, right? Like earlier, with this statement, right? Like, because they seem to be completely opposed
to each other. I mean, they are, because one is basically saying that we need
free is good, and the other is saying lock it down.
Yeah, you don't want the government to have any control over the internet whatsoever, and then you want to
my government,
unless
unless
there's a scary thing out there,
right?
Then we gotta,
what's the
if there's a scary thing outside, kids, we need to stop all fun. Everything ends, and we just need to
fun. Everybody huddle in the
corner,
right? Duck and cover. So I guess, Dennis, that's largely summarizing the position. So for those out there,
I really thought this would be more because I suggested this to Joel last week,
and he was all excited,
and we were like, yes. And then I did the research, and I didn't realize how thin one side was.
Yeah, and you can't see it, guys, but my head is literally leaning on the microphone right now. Like, because I'm just frustrated by I would love to be able to dig into two positions, right? I would love to be able to say, oh, here's one set of ideas, here's another. There's pros on this side and pros on this side, and, blah, 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 blah. There just isn't that, right? Like, there's a set of ideas and then a set of a couple of statements that kind of half make sense and kind of half don't.
No.
And that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of just cuts. I'm going here. Mr. Trump just doesn't seem well versed when it comes to internet policy.
No. I mean, I thought you were going a lot deeper than that. I don't think that's a stretch at this point.
Well,
I think we've laid that out.
And then, like, if you want to go further, like, he's got, I mean, there's 2 tweets. When it comes to internet policy, really, all I've been able to find is the 2 tweets.
Yep.
And, okay, in the last debate, in the second debate, he was asked, our institutions, are under attack. They're under cyber attack, is what the question was. And our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it and how do we fight it? And I'll read it verbatim.
Please do, because this boggled my mind when I watched it.
Okay. As far as the cyber, I agree to parts of what Secretary Clinton said.
Hey, hold on. You guys couldn't see it, but Dennis literally shivered when he read the cyber. Oh, yeah, that is an irksome phrasing.
What is the cyber?
There is... That's not a thing.
Okay, well, cyber, when people...
Well,
I work in IT. Like, we only say cyber if we're, like, on the Hill and Congress asks us about cyber. Like, it's just not a word that's really... I mean, cybersecurity, yes, it's a thing, but it's not just... It's not
kind of half a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not... It's such an old... whatever. But okay.
But anyways.
So, as far as the cyber, I agree to part of what Secretary Clinton said. We should be better than anybody else. And perhaps we're not. I don't think anybody knows that it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, Russia, Russia. I don't know. Maybe it was. I mean, it could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be a lot of people. It could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay? We came in with the internet. We came up with the internet. And I think Secretary Clinton and myself would very much would agree very much when we look at what ISIS is doing with the internet. They're beating us at our own game. ISIS. So we had to get very, very tough on cyber and cyber warfare. It's a huge problem. I have a son. He's 10 years old. He has computers. He is so good with those computers. It's unbelievable. The security aspect of cyber is very, very tough. And maybe it's hardly doable. But I will say, we are not doing the job we should be doing. But that's true throughout our whole government society. We have so many things that we have to do better. Lester, and certainly cyber, is one of them.
Lester?
That's the moderator's name. Oh. Lester Holt. Sorry.
Yeah. I just got... Sorry, I got confused.
And this will be the last thing we talk about tonight, because I'm really done. I can't. I don't know how long I can go on with this.
I'm fried. Yeah. There's really not much to unpack there, right?
There's
not.
Okay, well, let's see. I'm trying to, figure out the thought process. Because he basically says, okay, so they asked him about what you're going to do to fight, cybercrime. Basically, the question is really, what's your cybersecurity platform? Yeah. And he said he agreed with some of the stuff that Secretary Clinton said. And he said that we should be better than anyone else. Okay. Yes.
That's great.
That'd be great. And then he said, perhaps we're not.
Yeah, I should be 6'3", thin and handsome.
So, I mean,
but I ain't.
It's a bit of meat there. So we're not doing everything we should be doing. We should do better, I think is what he's saying there. Okay, sure. Fine. I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. So now he's speculating on, was it Russia, China? Okay, it was some fat guy on his bed. All I got to say is there's some 400-pound hackers out there. You don't want to anger that base up. Those guys will come after you.
Yeah. It's the last,
Why even mention the 400 pounds?
There's a lot of Dorito-fingered folks that are going to get angry.
Yeah.
Myself included about that one.
Okay, so then it's our internet again. So we came in with the internet. We came up with the internet. And, they agree very much. Secretary Clinton and him agree very much. When it comes to what ISIS is doing with the internet. He never actually really kind of bandies about what ISIS is doing with the internet, but okay. And and they're beating us at our own game. I don't know what that means.
This is a confusing one because what is commonly discussed with what ISIS is doing with the internet is they were recruiting.
They're just on the internet on forums talking, I think.
Yeah, they're recruiting through various forums and whatever. And I don't know how that's the U.S. government's game, but I get at least.
Well, I just don't understand. Like, the thing is if someone is okay, if you have citizens in your society that can go to a website and decide that they hate the country, then there's probably other ways to address that than, because the internet isn't the problem there.
No,
there's another problem.
It's just a way to move information from point A to point B.
Right. If somebody goes on the internet and then they're radicalized, I rarely think that that's the person on the other end that's really responsible. There's probably something else that's seated there. Yeah. I mean, and those are the issues we need to figure out. That's what we need to actually look at. Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, and again, like, my big thing with this is not a position.
And that's not cybersecurity. That is not cybersecurity. No. This is people speaking on the internet.
Yeah, this could be the same thing if you were talking about a cafe.
Yeah, cybersecurity
right? Like an actual physical, I go get a cup of coffee. That would be no different than what he's discussing.
Cybersecurity is spying. It is socially engineering information out of people in power. Right. It's spy games, but in a modern, IT frame of mind.
Yeah, and it's the defensive and offensive, components of that. Like, how do we secure our various systems, and how do we, penetrate other security or secured systems of our adversaries.
Right, and that's really what he should have been talking about there. He should be discussing what his plan was to, put things in place to not only stop people from, hacking, getting, like, vital information to our security, but how to go on the offensive about it too. And not give plans, but say, I'm going to fund this. I think this is very important. We need to do these things. He didn't say that. He went on to talk about his 10-year-old son and how good he is with a computer, which came out of nowhere. I don't even know where that applies. He kind of just talked about, I think, is this Barton? Is that right? Is that his son's name?
I don't know.
Yeah. So he brings that up. I think he was kind of, have you ever been asked a question and then you kind of give an answer just so you can kind of process a bit more?
Yeah, it's half my life.
Get you a bit more time. I think that's what the whole thing was. He's like, I'm going to talk about my son. Kids like, people love children.
This is what I'm saying. It's like I was standing in a line for a cup of coffee. Someone came up and asked me, what do you think of the new wide receiver, blah, blah, blah. And I go, oh, man, I haven't watched a game this season, and now I got to act like I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Well, what if I stall and look at his facial expressions, right? Or, and then try and feel this situation out. That's like what the stated policy is.
It really
is.
I'm
going to stall and see how everyone reacts, and then I'm going to have a position based on that. And that's very frustrating as someone who cares about these issues and would use that to inform their vote, right?
It is. And I mean, if the internet is an important issue to you, then you're probably in agreement with us, I would think.
Yeah. I would think. I mean, like, and I understand if it's not the primary issue that's going to drive your vote.
For me, it's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the top 5 for me though, and like I get it, right? Like, people have their opinions; they're going to vote however they vote. More power to you. But what I think we should do, and the time is probably past, frankly, in this election cycle, but I think what we should do is insist on our officials, as they run for elected office, to have real stated positions on topics of merit.
Seriously, there should be a list of 5 things. You know what? Have an election referendum. where we just, you take 30 issues, you throw them on there, we
These
vote.
are the 10 we care about as a society.
As a society, and then you got to have policy dispositions on all of these issues.
And if you don't, you're immediately disqualified. I would love that, because right now we'd be like, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to stay up late and write a position on this, sir. And that would be that, right? And it probably wouldn't be the best position, because I know I wrote many a paper late at night in school. But it would still be a paper.
Well, and let's be honest, that was back then. You didn't have Google at your fingertips.
No, yeah, well,
you can just go online and
we're old.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, so it's a lot easier these days. Yeah. You don't have to know that you don't need to learn the Dewey Decimal System or any of that stuff. Yeah. It's just out there.
Back in my day, we used card catalogs.
That's right. I remember going to those big wooden, with the grain.
Those things were awesome.
You just go in there and
I like to take the cards and move them around because I'm a jerk.
Bastard.
Yeah.
So, okay, on that note, that's really all there is to say about this. And we've been going at this for an hour and a half.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to edit some stuff out for you people.
This might be a two-parter.
Yeah. So the long and the short is, next time we get to do this in another 4 years, or if we're talking senators, we'll get another collection of them and congressmen in 2. Let's insist on more specifics from our officials.
Seriously. And if you guys out there, if we missed something, let us know. I mean,
yeah, I would love to find out that we missed something.
I'll
would actually make me happy.
It would. It really, really would, because I would hope that, somebody who could pretty much hold the keys to the country would have a position on
this stuff.
Well, yeah. But so, write us a podcast at groundedreason.com. You can just call 650-TALK-GRP. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so I guess that's it. I'm Dennis Restaro.
And this is Joel Reeves.
And we will see you next Monday. You might be asking, where's the movie quote? Well, we quoted the last line of the horror classic Nosferatu, starring Max Schreck. You probably just missed it. Make sure you hit us up with an email if you have some questions or comments. That's podcast@groundedreason.com. Make sure you tweet us at Grounded Reason, or you can check us out on the Facebook page, or you can leave a voicemail at 650-TALK-GRP. We'll see you next week.